Okay, so welcome everyone, and we are going to be looking at two comparisons today. The first and probably most important are a familial generational comparison, and that is Sarah, the queen of the Jewish people. If everyone could turn the videos on Zoom, we'd appreciate it. It makes it a lot more enjoyable and interactive. So we're going to meet the queen of the Jewish people. Her name was Sarai from birth, and then the hay was taken and, I wouldn't say loaned, but given to somebody else, and a hay was amended to her name. Sarah, the mother of the Jewish people, the wife of Abraham, and the Torah portion is called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. What's extraordinary is that the opening part of our Torah portion actually, sadly, begins with her death. And yet, the opening words are, V'yu Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, and then it tells us that she lived for 127 years. This causes a big question among the rabbis. Why call it the life of Sarah when she died at the end of last week's Torah portion? And, if not more importantly, we're about to discuss her funeral and all the preparation her husband Abraham has to do in order to bury her. From this, we can learn a number of very important lessons. Number one is, death isn't what we think it is. It's not the end. It's a different reality, a different phase, and it's not the end of a process. In some cases, it's just the beginning, because the soul lives on after death, which for many of you is obvious, but it's worth stating. And also a person's actions and the results of a lifetime of effort are there, are generational, have impact on friends, family, and descendants. So although a person moves on to the next world, we are mourning them when they die, but really, we're not mourning them per se, we're mourning ourselves that we don't have this person with us. This person is no longer in Olam Hazeh, in this world. They've moved on to Gan Eden, to the Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls. And one day, in the future, their body and soul will be reunited at the time of Tchiyat HaMeitim, at the time of resurrection of the dead. So they're in a better place. Then why are we crying when people die? And we know that Abraham lived God died. It says that he cried as well, because he was crying for himself. He was crying for a world that didn't have someone of the caliber of Sarah, someone who loved very dearly, that he had been through so much with, that someone he had created such an incredible life with was not with him anymore. And that's where we are in the Torah portion, Chai Sarah, the life of Sarah, the celebration and the continuation, because right after this event, Sarah is going to have her son, Yitzchak, married to an incredible woman, Rebecca, who is going to continue in her spiritual mission of this world. And there are even some proofs in things that happened to Rebecca that were clear indications to Abraham and to Isaac that this woman, Rebecca, was going to continue and build up the Jewish people, something that Sarah herself had begun to do in her life. And the word Sarah means the princess, the queen. She was Jewish royalty. Let's start with a quick story. And the story is told of Rabbi Akiva, a very famous story. Rabbi Akiva was teaching a class. This is the great Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers, writers, of course, and appears in the Gemara many, many times. We know that just like Abraham, he knew nothing from birth. At the age of 40 years old, he started to learn Torah for the first time. He learned for 40 years, and then he taught for 40 years, and he died at 127 years. So the great Rabbi Akiva, who had tens of thousands of students, and by the way, he was killed by the Romans, al-Kiddush Hashem, for continuing to teach Torah. And there is Rabbi Akiva, and he's teaching a class of students. I give you that background just to make me feel better, because while he was teaching, the Gemara tells us, he saw that his students were falling asleep. That makes me feel great. Because if the great Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis in world history, someone who had told that even Moses somehow was transported in time to his class, and it used to be in those days that the front row were the best students, and the second row were the next best students, and the last row were the weakest students, Moses himself was transported to a class of Rabbi Akiva, and he wasn't in the first, second, or third row. He was in the 6th, 7th, or 17th, wherever it was. He wasn't so happy about that until he had Rabbi Akiva saying that everything I know comes from Moses and Mount Sinai. And then even Moses' soul was calmed down. So we're dealing with one of the greatest rabbis in Jewish history and greatest Kabbalists. He knew secrets of mysticism. He was able to enter into the deepest realm, says the Gemara, of mystical thought, referred to as the Pardes, the orchard, and enter and leave unscathed from that experience. And there is students falling asleep. I don't feel so bad. As the famous story goes, someone goes to a rabbi and says, how many people do you have praying in your synagogue? And he says about half of them. So too, there is Rabbi Akiva, students falling asleep, and he stops the class and he says, I have a question for you. In what merit did Esther, Queen Esther, from the Purim story, who was married to Mordechai, her cousin, who managed to fight off Haman and ended up being married to Achashverosh against her will. In what merit did Queen Esther have to rule over 127 provinces? In what merit did she have that? And the students, their interest was piqued, and they woke up suddenly. And they thought about it. And they thought, what's he talking? Why is it about Queen Esther all of a sudden? And what do you mean, in what merit did she have to rule over 127 provinces from Hodu, from Ethiopia to Kush, from Ethiopia to Hodu to India? And he says, I'll tell you, in the merit of her great-great-great-great-grandmother, Sarah. Because Sarah lived, the Torah tells us in this week's portion, for 127 years. And everyone's interest is piqued. Like, what's the connection over here? Why would that be? Come the commentators and explain exactly what Rabbi Akiva was telling his students. Sarah lived 127 years. And it's not described that way. It says, V'yachai Sarah mea shana, she lived for 100 years. V'esrim shana, 20 years. V'sheva shanim, and 7 years, shnei chai Sarah. Those are the life of Sarah. Those are the years of the life of Sarah. Why is it divided up? To tell us that these three groupings, 7, 20, and 100, they all were perfect. She was clean of sin to the age of 7. She remained clean of sin to the age of 20 and to 127 as well. All of her years were good. They were all productive. She never wasted a moment of her time. Her entire life was spent clean of sin, just like a young child who is pure of sin, into her old age. She had the same stamina, the same power from her younger years into her older years. So not only did she live 127 years, but all of her years were together. And she came into her life with 127 years of great, amazing, powerful mission completed. Says the Sfas Emes something unbelievable. And this is what Rabbi Akiva was saying. If you treat every year like it's a country, every month like it's a city, every day like it's a town, every minute like it's a small community, you will have achieved greatness in your life. Esther was the queen of space. She was able to create a whole new reality of ruling over space, over makom, location. The entire world was affected by Esther, and she was the queen of space. Sarah, she was the queen of time, of Zman. And when we live in this world, we live in two worlds, time and space. And we consider them connected. They are not different. We Jews are good at creating holy places, temples, synagogues, Bate Midrash, places of study. But you know what we're really good at? Creating holy places in time, in Zman. Time itself has inherent Kedusha, holiness, and space. And these two great Jewish women forged for every single man, woman, and child throughout history from our nation the power of control over time and over space. And it's in that merit that Queen Esther was successful in her mission of ruling over all that land and all those thousands and thousands of people, because her great-great-great-great-grandmother used her life perfectly. And so Sarah's dead at the beginning of the parsha, but we see from Rabbi Akiva that her legacy lives on, and on, not even one generation later, not two, but tens of generations later. The Purim story happened centuries later, and yet the impact of Sarah went on and on and on. And that's true for her. It's true for us. We learn from this story something very important. First of all, the power of time, and that's what Rabbi Akiva was telling his students. Wake up, time is precious, right? I know we're all very good at it, myself as well, of killing time. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein used to say, killing time, that expression, is a great expression. That's taka retzicha. That is murder. Right? Time is one of the few gifts we have in this world that you cannot take back. So when you hear that expression, I'm just killing time, people be like, oh, that's mamish retzicha. That is murder. We learn the effect that we can have on the future. And it works both ways. The fact that we identify as Jewish people, that we have this rich history, and that it took a lot of people, a lot of time to get us into this moment right now. It didn't start with you, my friends. I know you're thinking, I started my spiritual mission. It's all about me. I created it. And the answer is, that's just not true. You didn't. How do you know? Maybe your grandmother, maybe your great-grandmother, maybe your great-great-grandmother, who I'm pretty sure most of you don't even know the name of. Maybe she stood one Friday night, lighted the candles, and invariably, your great-grandmothers did light candles, if not your great-great-grandmother. And they lit candles and they cried and said, I see what's happening in the world. Let my children, let my boys and my daughters and my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, let them connect to God, to Judaism, to Torah, and to mitzvot. And those tears travel through time and impact you right now without you even realizing it. We are the products. I know we're all full of ourselves. Look at me. I've achieved so much. I'm learning. I'm growing. Who says? Maybe just like Queen Esther, you were just handed an incredible family, a great lineage that led to this exact moment in your life. So there's a two-way effect that's happening over here. Okay. Sarah was famous for 3 miracles that she had manifested around her all the time. Let's discuss those miracles. Let's see in what merit they may have happened. And then let's see how they transferred perfectly to the next generation. And then we'll try to figure out what makes miracles happen. Because if they happen then, they could well be happening now. So the first miracle was that every Friday, Sarah lit an oil lamp, which had oil enough for one day. Sound familiar, right? And the oil lasted from Friday to Friday. Every Friday, she had to relight it. Miracle number 1. Miracle number 2, She used to make dough and bread, and she used to serve her family and feed guests who would come in to literally the hotel that her and her husband set up, her and Abraham. And even a small amount of bread was delicious and would satisfy even the biggest, hungriest appetite. The dough, the isa, and the lechem in her home satisfied even a small amount, a vast amount of people. And number 3, there was a cloud, my friends, that hovered over the tent of Sarah and Abraham. And it was there all the time. That tent, whenever it was pitched, the cloud appeared. Because remember, Abraham and Sarah were traveling around. They were trying to bring people back to God. They were spreading ethical and moral monotheism, belief in the one true God. And they were pulling people away from idol worship and bringing them close to the God of mercy. When she died, the cloud disappeared, the light extinguished, and the blessing in the isa, in the dough that she made, went away as well. It disappeared. When did it reappear? It reappeared when the next phase of her life came to fruition, and that was Rebecca. Isaac knew when he met Rebecca that this was the destined partner he was going to bring his parents' mission to a continued fruition when the light reappeared and when the bread blessing reappeared and when the cloud reappeared suddenly above his tent after it had been missing from the death of his mother. Now, the question I always have about this is, why exactly did Sarah have to light the candle every single week? If God's making miracles, make a miracle. She lit it once. First time she lit it, when she was, I don't know, bat mitzvah, when she got married to Abraham, I don't know, whenever you want to do it. And the light stayed lit forever. That would have been good. And why does she have to keep making dough? Say she made dough and the dough lasted forever. It's a miracle. Miracles happen. And there it was. And the cloud manifestation. Why didn't it travel with them? Why did it suddenly appear above her tent every single time that the tent was repitched? It's a fair question. I want to share 2 very, very important answers to this question, which is going to reveal not just much about life, spirituality, and miracles, but about the power of great Jewish women that they have. That is manifest. Because if you're a Jewish woman, you are a descendant of Queen Esther, possibly, but definitely a descendant of Sarah, our great-great-great-grandmother. Number 1, we learn something very important. And that is, in order to have miracles in our lives, you can't just wait or expect them. Al tismoch al hanes. You've got to do something. There's never been a miracle recorded anywhere in Jewish history, whether in the Torah, whether in Tanakh, in scriptures, whether even in the Gemara, that just appears out of nowhere. Someone has to do something. Someone has to do something. When the sea split, we needed someone called Nachshon ben Aminadav, the prince of the tribe of Judah, to walk into the water. There had to be a wind that blew, easterly wind, the entire night before. Moses had to put his staff out over the water. It didn't just boop happen. Someone had to do something. That something was small, but there had to be an act. Always something going on. And when Abraham and Sarah pitched their tent, that was their effort, the cloud appeared. They had to make the dough. Why not just have God make the dough and last forever? It doesn't work that way. You've got to put in some effort. Always has to be some effort. And she had to prepare the lights and either press the olives herself or prepare the olive oil, put in the wick, make a fire and create it. Miracles don't just happen out of nowhere. They never do. There has to be some hishtadlut, some effort you put in, and then God comes and responds. There has to be a small step that you take, and then there is a response which is bigger and better. Do you create that response? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if you don't put in some effort, great things are not going to happen. The effort could be minute, but you cannot rely upon a miracle. There has to be a door that is open, that is going to allow this miracle to manifest itself. You have to open yourself up with something, some small movement, some small action. Then why did she have to do it every Friday night? What's that about? Because the effort has to be continual. Spiritual growth takes continual work. It's not enough to say, I did it once and let God take care of it. It doesn't work that way. It takes effort, it takes constant effort and constant movement. And so we see that Sarah was the queen of the Jewish people, not because she sat back like a queen and said, I'm on my throne and make it happen. She was a woman of action. And we see her action. We see her making bread while her husband was out getting the meat. And we see her preparing for guests. And we see her opening the tent on all four sides. Just like a chuppah, a wedding marriage canopy, is open on all four sides. Every single Jewish couple begins their life under a chuppah, which is a physical recreation and spiritual manifestation of the tent of Abraham and Sarah, which is also open on all four sides. Why is the chuppah open on all four sides? To represent the home of Abraham and Sarah, which is open on all four sides as well. To allow guests to come in. We're not going to just sit down in our homes and close ourselves off. We're going to be open for guests to come in and for blessings to go out in all four directions, which is exactly how Abraham and Sarah lived. And it was in the merit of Sarah that these miracles happen. It is the holy Jewish woman that brings blessing into the home. And it is the Jewish man who has to keep his devotion to his Jewish wife and the family, which is tough. Marriage takes effort and time, but only through their continual working and relationship together will the blessings be manifested in their home. There is no greater blessing than shalom bayit. They're bringing peace into the home. That is the light, the spiritual manifestation. That is the bread. That is the physical sustenance, the parnassah, making a living manifestation of success. And the cloud is God's protection over every Jewish home if they are able to bring this together. That is the secret of Sarah's success. Her and Abraham were giving people. And so it makes sense that Abraham wanted to give Sarah the burial that she deserved. And to do that, he needed to find the perfect location. And he did. And he found this location in an unusual way. While he was looking for cattle to catch and kill to feed his guests, the bakar that's mentioned in last week's Torah portion, rearrange the letters bakar, says the Ben Ish Chai, one of the great Kabbalists who lived in Iraq in the late 1800s. Rearrange the letters bakar, you get kever, burial place. And he found the burial place of two great people, Adam and Sarah. You see, it was a miracle that he managed to find this location. But he found it in the merit of his action of trying to entertain and welcome guests, achnasat orchim. And he says, that's what I want to buy, and that is where I want to bury Sarah, and that's where I am going to be buried as well. And that location was Marat HaMachpelah, the double cave in Kiryat Arba, because there were 4 couples that were buried there in the city of Hebron. And so Abraham has to go now and persuade a character called Ephron, Hachiti, the Hittite, to sell him this piece of land. Now, Abraham had been promised the land of Israel, all of it. So, in a sense, the land was his, and he did not need to purchase it. He just had to wait, because it was always going to be his. And yet, Abraham spent money. And when I say money, I mean a vast amount of money in order to purchase this piece of land. As it says in chapter 23, verse 16, Vayishma Avram el Ephron, Vayishkal Avram el Ephron et kesef. He gave him 400 shekel kesef, 400 silver shekels worth of money. Doesn't sound so much, 400 shekels. Yeah, that's in 2020. And that's, by the way, a daily change in reality. Back then, that was the equivalent of millions of dollars. Millions of dollars to buy this, way out of proportion. By the way, Abraham and Ephron are contrasted. We saw Sarah and Esther compared. Now we're going to compare two opposites, Abraham and Ephron. Abraham, says the Mishnah in Perek Avot, was very, very good at promising people small amounts. Last week, if you remember, in last week's Torah portion, he said, guests, come to my home. I'll give you a little bit of bread. I'll give you some water. He ends up giving them a massive meal. Abraham was famous for promising a little, saying little, not boasting, but doing lots. Ephron, who we meet in this week's Parsha, Torah portion, is the exact opposite. Ephron was Mr. Promise lots, but deliver a little. Because when Abraham approaches him, he says, I want to buy the land. And Ephron says to him, come on, you, the great Abraham, there's no charge. And Abraham says, no, I want to buy the land. Just give me a price. It's between me and you. What's money? You're wealthy. I'm wealthy. I have something you need very, very much. Consider it yours. He says, no, I'm paying. He says, oh, you want to pay? This is the price. There wasn't a single haggle. This absurd amount of money, and by this was done in front of many, many people, and recorded in the Torah. You don't usually see money amounts mentioned in the Torah. People buy things all the time. We're not told how much he paid for meat, how much he paid for his house, and dowries. This, however, is mentioned specifically in the Torah. Why? Because Ephron is not what you want to be. A person who promises big, oh yeah, take it. Oh, you want to pay? I'll take 20 million, which was way, way above what he should have paid for it. But Abraham never complained. And he bought it for a vast amount of money for a few reasons. Reason number one is he wanted it to be known at his time and for the future that this land was bought and was not a gift. Because gifts can always be recalled. You give someone a gift, you know what? I think I'll take that back. It couldn't be a gift. Number two, holy things need work. If you want to acquire holiness in this land through the purchase of Abraham, the Torah itself is going to hint at this, changed. Once it moved from the ownership of Ephron to the ownership of Abraham, this was not the same piece of land. It became a holy property. And in order to have Kedusha, you're going to have to put in some effort. And in this case, that effort was financial. And in this case, it was a vast amount of money, which shows the inherent holy value this piece of land had and still has. Those who've been to Hebron, who visited Mar Machpelah, you should know that it is extremely kadosh piece of land. Because Abraham and Sarah are going to be buried over there. And Isaac and Rebekah are going to be buried over there. And Jacob and Leah, Yaakov and Leah, are going to be buried there as well. And the head of Esau. But that's another discussion we'll get to another time in future weeks, God willing. And so if you want to have holiness, you're going to have to spend. I know you're thinking, but holiness, it's so spiritual, it's come for free. The answer is no. If you want to acquire great things, it's going to take effort. Abraham has proved to us. If you want to have a holy Shabbat, you're going to have to spend money to make it holy. You want to do mitzvot, you're going to have to spend money. You want a good Jewish education, you're going to have to pay for it. If it comes for free, it's almost meaningless. Some money, time, effort, sweat has to be invested in order to acquire Kedusha. Israel is one of three things that has to be acquired through effort, challenge, and difficulty. Make no mistake, Torah. If you want Torah in your life, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to disconnect. You're going to have to go to class. You're going to have to pay an institution. You're going to have to put effort, time, and energy into it. It doesn't come for free. It takes yigiyah. It takes shvitz. We learn this from Abraham. He's like, I want this holy land. You're going to have to pay for it. I understand. Above cost, I understand. Above retail, this could probably be the first and last time Jews have paid above retail. But that, my friends, is exactly what happened at this time. And look what the Torah tells us, something unbelievable that happens right after he buys it. And this was done publicly, so everybody should know about it. It says, Vayishkal Avraham lefron de kesef shediber baz nechet. He paid him the money, 400 shekel kesef. And in chapter 23, verse 17, it says, Vayakam sedei Ephron. The field of Ephron, which is where Abraham purchased, which was the burial place of Adam and Sarah, Vayakam. What does Vayakam mean? It got up. When it got up, where did it get up to? What, it just got up and walked away? How does the land get up? The rabbis jump on this one word and say something unbelievable. Vayakam. It wasn't the same piece of land from before and after this transaction. As soon as he handed over the money, the land itself took an aliyah. It went up in status and prestige and in Kedusha. And for the rest of history, this one transaction has stood, there you go, it even works in English, has stood up and beat time. To this day, Hebron is considered one of the 4 holy cities of the Jewish people that represents the place, say the Kabbalists, where all neshamot, all souls of the Jewish people when they die, pass through this city. Just like all prayers pass through Jerusalem and the Makam HaMikdash, the place of the temple, that is the Shar HaShamayim, we're going to see later on. Yaakov is going to identify Temple Mount as the gateway to heaven, where all prayers pass through to heaven. So to all neshamot are going to pass through this location of Hebron. It's going to represent the place of movement of souls from Olam Hazeh into Olam HaNeshamot, to the world of souls, into Gan Eden. It was Abraham, our forefather, who spent a vast amount of money to keep that merit together with us. Vayakam Sidei Ephron. Ephron's field changed forever. Okay? And that's why he paid so much money, to sever all ties, so there'd be no doubts whatsoever, so that the Kiddush, the holiness, would always be there. Sarah has died, and Abraham mourns her. Interestingly, it says, chapter 24, verse 1, Va'avraham zaken ba biyamim. Abraham was old, and his days came with him. Ba bayamim. Who knows what that means? Bayamim. He's old. V'Hashem barach, and God blessed et Abraham bakol. Bakol. He blessed him with everything. So some people were like, yeah, he was very, very wealthy, very successful. He's going to use a lot of that wealth to find a shidduch, a fine woman for his son, Isaac. Bakol actually is the gematria of Ben, son. He was blessed with a son. And now he had to marry his son off because he needed to continue the Jewish people and get things going. Okay? So God blessed him. By the way, what is Ba Bayamim? And the rabbis tell us Ba Bayamim came with days. That means all of his days were good. All of his life was good. Just like Sarah's life was all good, so too Abraham's years were full and complete and shalem. Although he died 175, he's not there yet. All of his life was with him. He came with full days. The commentators ask a very, very interesting question. Is that true? Was all of his life good? Don't you remember that Abraham's father was an idolater? Don't you remember that Abraham himself worshipped idols, says Maimonides, in the laws of idol worship? and therefore spent many of his early days, it shouldn't say all of it, say most of his days were good. First few years, a little bit dodgy, not his fault. Born to Terach, an idol worshiper, actually an idol salesman. So not so good, but he fixed it at the age of 3 or the age of 40, say the rabbis, right? Or what started at 3, culminated at the age of 40. Why? Babi Amim. All of his days were good. And here we learn another fantastic lesson, which I like to tell converts, Bali Tshuva, and really pretty much everyone, really. We all make silly mistakes. We all get involved in stupid things, especially in our childhood. And many people carry a lot of guilt for all those mistakes. And guilt may not be a bad thing, right? That is a motivation for change. But shame, that's a bad thing. And we walk around with shame and like, why did I have to waste so much time and with that nonsense, all those years, whatever it was, those friends, those people, those places, those things, whatever it is. And the answer is, if those are the circumstances that you found yourself in, and those were the decisions you made as a young person, that's what made you who you are. You have to use all those experiences to somehow make yourself better, to somehow help other people, which Abraham did. He used his early idol worshipping days as proof of, I did it. I've been there. I know what you went through, and it wasn't good. Let me talk to you about the alternative. He is the classic Choser b'teshuvah. Isaac wasn't. Isaac was born to a religious father. Jacob wasn't. Jacob was born to a religious grandfather and father. Abraham is considered the greatest of the avot, of the forefathers, because he was born to an idol worshiper. He was able to turn that around. He didn't say, forget the idol worship. He's like, that's what made me who I am. I had to go through those years of idol worship in order to become the great person and to use everything I've learned in order to help other people. And now he's got to find a shidduch for his son. And that's not an easy thing. Not easy for anyone. Dating can be tough. I always like to point out that the longest prayer in the Bible that's actually written out, as in someone you see and you hear words of prayer, not words that are taken and used by us nowadays as a form of prayer, like the Shema. The longest prayer that is written in the Torah is the expression and the prayer of Eliezer. Eliezer is tasked with finding a shidduch, a wife for Isaac. And he prays. And he prays in vain. And it's not a coincidence that the longest prayer in the entire Bible, in the entire Torah, is someone looking for a shidduch for someone else. We learn here, just that piece of information alone is worth you coming online to hear my words today. We learn that tefillah, prayer, and shidduch, finding a suitable marriage partner, are deeply connected. The fact that the entire prayer is printed out in the Torah and actually repeated again, right? In detail, so many words, so many words. We have entire mitzvot learned out from one verse, from one word, sometimes from one letter. An entire mitzvah in the Torah. And yet the sikha, the conversation of a servant of Abraham, is written out in full detail. And when it comes to finding a shidduch, it was worth it. And Abraham says, I need you to go back to Haran. Haran is where my family are. I need you to find someone, but I'm not just looking for pedigree. I need you to find someone who's got the right midot, who's got the right character. And if you go back and you find my family members and they don't have the right character, don't find a wife over there. Find a good person elsewhere. There's people I've influenced here in town, in Israel, and we'll find among them. But first, let's see who we have among our brethren. And that's exactly what Eliezer does. Off he goes to find a shidduch for his son. And he does. Just a few more minutes. He finds at a well, right? Seems like the watering hole. Maybe it's the bar of its day. He finds a girl. And this young girl, right, Some say she was 3 years old. The Vilna Gaon says it's a Talmud. She was actually 13 years old. Don't think that's so weird. My grandmother was betrothed at 9 and married at 12. That's my grandmother. Okay? Not here in America. That's over there in the Middle East. Okay? Another story, not for now. A lot of stories about her. As I tell my daughters, be very careful at 15 because, you know what? Okay. And so he looks for character traits and he prays. As soon as he prays, she turns up. And we know the famous story that she starts to give him water because at the watering well. And Eliezer is there with a lot of merchandise in order to pay the family a dowry, in order to have the merit of taking this young Jewish woman. He's got a promise that she's going to have the physical financial ability to create lives. And Eliezer promises that. And we know very famously, she waters Eliezer and his people. And then she waters all the camels. And Eliezer saw spiritual acts among them. And he realized, I found the perfect person. I found a giver. Sarah was a giver. This woman has the ability to give as well. He meets family. And then Rebecca accompanies him from Haran to Hebron to meet her future shidduch, her future husband, Yitzchak. And the Torah tells us that Isaac, Yitzchak, was in a field. And it was the afternoon when they turn up. And the meeting is actually written at the end of the Torah portion, chapter 24, verse 62. And there he is. And he's out in the field in the afternoon. What exactly is he doing out in the field in the afternoon? Right? Suach besadeh, he was praying. Yitzchak created the idea of afternoon prayer. That's Isaac. That's Yitzchak. Abraham created shacharit. Right? Vayakam Avram baboker. Vayashkem baboker. He woke up early in the morning. Abraham is morning prayer. He represents morning. He represents new life, new beginnings. The sun rises. That's so Abraham, spreading new light to the world. So what does Yitzchak represent? Yitzchak represents the afternoon. What's the afternoon? Hard work, gevura, power, strength. When people are in the field and they're working, spirituality in the middle of the day. In the morning, I just woke up. Oh, thank you, God, I woke up. At nighttime, I'm not so busy. I can thank God too. But during the day, that's hard. I got work. That's Yitzchak. That is gevura. And when Rebecca saw him, she was so taken aback by his spiritual and physical visage, she slipped and fell off a donkey at that time. That is the impact. And as soon as Isaac saw that she had this tremendous power, he was able to realize that this was the continuation of his wife Sarah. The light came back, and the blessing, the bread came back, and the cloud came back, and he lived with her, and they were a loving couple who were able to continue the power of the Jewish people. We're going to talk about the next generation next week when we talk all about Yaakov, because Isaac's life, you don't see too much about. He's a closed character. After the Akedah, he wasn't allowed to leave Israel. He's going to represent the hard, hidden spiritual work we need to put in, the effort in order to make greatness. Yaakov, his son, is going to be the synthesis, because Abraham's going to be the thesis. And Isaac is the antithesis, and Yaakov is the synthesis going to bring it all together. You can't have two extremes. There has to be a bonding, a coming together, a synthesis of the two extremes of Chesed, Abraham, and Gevura, Isaac, and that's going to be Yaakov. And we'll revisit Yaakov next week, God willing. We will start